Chapter 34, apologies if you were waiting for this because I had hoped to do chapter 33 and 34 on the same thing, but then I ran out of memory on my phone. I thought I'd been deleting things and I hadn't, just been pretending to delete them. Now there's deleted, and so we can crack on. I promise you that I will finish the book before the end of term. There's not long to go, so I was hoping to read 2 chapters tonight, but it is getting late, so we'll just have to see. Chapter 34. They ran down the corridor away from the troopers. Bixer led the way, a cannon in each hand, hair bristling with needles. Lucky was right behind her. Next came Frolics, carrying Mystica in one huge arm, leading the captain by the hand. And above their heads flew Bazooka, flapping her wings in celebration of their escape. A massive explosion shook the corridor behind them. They heard Major Dashwood's war cry and the screams of AXA troopers. Then the explosion stopped. It grew ominously still and silent behind them. "Major Dashwood," called Lucky over his shoulder. "Are you okay?" No answer came back. "Bixer, he knew what he was doing," said Bixer. "Keep going, don't stop." She was moving ahead quickly, scouting the way forward, round a corner and out of sight. Lucky waited for Frolics to catch up. Together they edged around the corner, then up some steps, making their way in silence towards the surface of the planet. But a detachment of troopers was waiting for them on the next level. They raised their cannon, fired, and a volley of shots hit the wall above Lucky's head, shattering the stone. Mystica and Nox cringed away from the shrapnel. They looked so frail, so vulnerable. "Stay back!" cried Bixer. She ran full pelt at the troopers, flicked a crimson needle at them, and kaboosh! Everything in Lucky's head went weird. His senses scrambled, all mixed up. Sounds became shapes, colours had tastes, and the troopers were throwing up, sinking to their knees, clutching their heads and weeping. "Sensory dazzler?" asked Lucky, barely holding down the nausea. Bixer grinned. "You're catching on." "This," groaned Captain Nox, "is why we don't like violence." "But we're getting there," said Bixer. "Just 2 more lefts and a right, and then we'll be clear of this level." "Are you sure?" asked Lucky, running after her. "Can you really remember every turning we took on the way in?" "If you'd been watching, instead of feeling sorry for yourself," she said, "then maybe you'd remember too." 2 lefts and a right after, a dead end loomed up ahead of them. A solid wall. A vidcam stared silently down at them from the ceiling. Said Bixer. "Did we pass this on our way in?" "I don't know," Lucky retorted. "I was too busy feeling sorry for myself." Cautiously, she approached the wall. "Frolics," she called, "hang back behind that corner with Mystica and Nox till I tell you it's safe. There's something about this I don't like." The vidcam whirred, and suddenly the wall began to move. It slid open before their startled eyes, and on the other side, dozens of AXA troopers were waiting. They had an entire armoury of weapons, racks of cannon and ammunition, stacks of ground blasters and grenade, heaps of body armour and shields. Bixer fired both her guns at once, and the shots bounced right off their shields. The fire came straight back at her. "Duck!" she yelled. She and Lucky hit the floor together as fire singed their hair. Bixer tossed aside her cannon and sprang into action with astral martial arts instead. She leapt Leo style over a blast from the first trooper, then hit him with a cancer pincer move. The trooper crumpled, dropping his blaster. Bixer caught it. She took out 2 more with her elbows as she went all Sagittarius, unleashing a hail of jabs and punches, but the others were on to her at once, surrounding her. And now one of the troopers was in Lucky's face, shoving him back, aiming the muzzle of a cannon at him. Lucky shaped up to deliver a scorpio kick, and the trooper cracked him across the face with the barrel of a gun. Excruciating pain exploded in Lucky's mouth. There was a terrible crunching sound. It sounded like teeth breaking. He could taste something salty. He wondered if it was blood. He hit the ground, stars spinning before his eyes. The trooper cracked his cannon. "You leave him alone!" roared Bixer. She reared up like a lioness and let loose a ferocious blow that knocked the trooper sideways. But the walls were beginning to move again, swivelling, sliding, trapping them in the corner, and more troopers were coming through all the time. It was getting desperate now. Bixer fought on, but she was just one girl. Even with all her skills, she couldn't keep it up forever. She was pinned down in the corner, and there were more, always more, coming through all the time. Crack! One of the troopers broke through her defences. She reeled back. Whack! Bixer gasped. She glanced down at Lucky. He wasn't doing what he'd promised, and they both knew it. Bazooka the Phoenix swooped down at the trooper, claws extended, breathing fire, but the big man swatted her away like she was an insect and levelled his cannon at Bixer's head. "You're dead," he said. He grinned, pulled the safety catch, and... It is coming. It is rising. It is time. At the centre of Lucky's being, a spark of power flared into life. Impossible energies began to burn. His fingertips began to shine. And finally, the light poured out of him. The brightest light he'd ever seen, pouring from his hands, his head, his heart. The trooper gasped. He dropped his cannon. Shielding his eyes, he backed away as the power rose and swelled and grew, blazing from Lucky like a star. A star. What else could it be? It had been growing inside him, in his dreams and in his body, all this time, and now it was scorching out of him with unearthly light and heat and power, stronger than the fires of a nuclear furnace, bigger than the blast of 1 billion atom bombs. So bright and brilliant it was like staring at the sun. At that moment he knew the Star Talkers were right. There was no limit to his power, no limit to what it could do if he just let it go. The other troopers saw it. They fell back, but they were disciplined, crack troops. They regrouped, aimed their weapons at Lucky, and pulled all their triggers at once. A great hail of death came shooting towards them. He held up a hand, and the power of a star exploded out of him. Fire flashed from his fingers like a flaming sword. It caught their blasts and made them harmless. Not one of their shots got through. Lucky pulled himself up from the floor, flames crackling over his head like a halo, and sent a solar flare out at their armoury. He was painfully aware that he was burning his own life away. The power was killing him, but he was determined not to kill anyone else with it. He was aiming to destroy their weapons, not the troopers, but their instruments of death. The solar flare hit and the weapon racks went up into the flames. The blasters blew up. The cannons melted. The ammunition exploded like a string of fireworks going off. Bixer's eyes widened. She watched from the corner, staring directly at the light that shone from Lucky's body, but she was not blinded by it. She looked inspired. She got up, needles flashing neon colours, and sprang forward again, a one-girl whirlwind of a fighting force running out ahead of the fire. Lucky moved forward with her. Between them they were unbeatable. The warrior girl with needles in her hair and the boy with the star inside him. They fought side by side. It was like a furnace in an armoury now. The temperature was still rising. At the back of his throat, Lucky could taste something like sulphur, filling his senses with fire, but the power was so strong, so bright, it was irresistible. And it streamed out of him, unstoppable. Not just his hands now, his whole body was aflame. "The Astraeus," called the troopers. "The old ones have returned." And with that, they broke ranks at last and began to flee in terror. When it was done, all those fearsome troopers had been put to flight, and their deadly weapons were smoke and ashes. Lucky and Bixer turned to each other. Bixer's eyes were alight. She looked on the scorching star that burned in Lucky's chest, and she was not afraid. She held out a hand and reached with her long, beautiful fingers, reaching towards the blazing furnace in his heart. "Don't," he warned her. "Don't touch me. It'll kill you." But she reached and touched, just for a moment, and her silver eyes glowed ultra bright. "Don't fear it, Lucky," she said, across the gap between them. "It's so beautiful. We try so hard to be like the stars, but you actually are one. He watched her, speechless, filled with feelings he didn't have names for. It was a moment when time seemed to stop, but it was just a moment. And then they heard voices calling from round the corner, and Bixer stepped away from Lucky unharmed. "Is it safe?" asked Frolics. "Yeah," said Bixer, looking up. "Yeah, it's safe." She grinned and ran her fingers through her neon needles in her hair. "Watch out, Theobroma," she whooped. "We're coming for you." "Bazooki!" exclaimed the phoenix, picking herself up and leading the way forward again, flying towards freedom. They moved on, up and up and up, rising through the levels with new hope, fresh determination. They burst out of the Charin caves, out of the bunker, through the gates and back into the open air. It was freezing cold outside. On the surface of the planet, the blizzard was still raging. The air was full of ice, yet still the star blazed out of Lucky's body. And through the blizzard, through the whirling whiteness, they could see an entire army waiting for them by their encampment, row after row of troopers facing them, with cannon and blasters all ready. The Axa army in all its power and glory, and beyond it, the Skyhawks of the Axa fleet. "King Theobroma!" Bixer yelled. "We need to talk to you." "Put down your weapons," a harsh voice came back. "Put them down or we will destroy you." Was that the king's voice? Lucky looked out from the army. At the army, he couldn't see where the voice had come from. There were just too many of them. It was 1,000,000 against 2. He looked up at the sky. Even through the radiation storm, he could see that it was bleached white as bones with the dying supernova light of Aquarius. "King Theobroma," called Bixer again. "If you're here, then answer me. By all the stars, this is the most important thing that has ever been." No answer came back, except for the click of safety catches being unlatched and the rumble of weapons powering up. The Axa army weren't listening. The king wasn't coming. The plan wasn't going to work. Lucky felt bleak and angry. This was not the way he wanted it to end, burning his own life away just so he could take the lives of others. Surely this wasn't what he was supposed to do with his power. Surely he was meant for something more. Wind whipped into his face, yet his insides felt like superheated matter, raging against the blizzard. Red hot, white hot, hotter still. Some of the Axa troopers shielded their eyes as the solar wind swirled around them. Some of them dropped to their knees, but still the power rose inside him, higher and higher and higher again. His body was shaking. It felt like his head was splitting under the strain, breaking open as arcs of pain shot across his face, brighter and stronger than any human body could contain. He was holding his hands out ahead of him, trying with all his might to restrain the power that was bleeding out of him, the fire and the light and the burning in his brain. But it was bigger than him. It was like an endless nuclear meltdown, a chain reaction that could burn this whole world and more, and if he just let it go, he would explode, destroying himself and everything around him. Everything. "There's no stopping it," he thought. "It's going to blow." "Enough," came a new voice rolling over the blizzard. "Put down your weapons. No one hurts that boy." It was a rich, deep voice, not loud, but totally commanding. The troops lowered their weapons. Lucky looked up, trying to see who'd spoken, and then it came, that voice. "Boy, here I am. I am your king. I am Theobroma." I'm going to do chapter 35.
Why don't you call king? You're the president. How that work?
I'm not getting into it.
Because kings will be all fancy wearing crowns and stuff. Presidents seem like serious, wearing like normal jackets and all sorts.
King, you like, it's a family thing. If you're king, you're king. And your children will be kings and queens. That's a family thing. But presidents and prime ministers are usually, not always, but
Elected.
usually elected. Right, chapter 35.
Yay.
And there in front of him, at the end of the line of troopers, stood Theobroma, the Axa King. There was something surprising about the way he looked. He was large and imposing, as tall as Captain Knox and as broad as Frolics. His horns were huge curving crescents that pointed straight up at the sky, but he did not look wild or savage or terrifying as he did in the government vid pics. No, he looked like an old-fashioned king. On his head was a crown that glittered like starlight. On his shoulders were robes of black velvet. Most unexpected was his face. His features seemed full of compassion. His eyes were not mad and staring. They were warm, ruby red, like the last moments of a summer sunset. Even from the distance, Lucky could feel the power of his gaze. The king was looking at him like he couldn't take his eyes off him, and there was something about him that Lucky couldn't look away from either, a charisma that commanded his attention completely. "Put down your cannon," the king ordered his forces. His voice so deep and quiet, so rich and strong, it compelled everyone's attention. "Bow down before the Astraeus." The troopers turned to look at Lucky. His body was glowing, pulsing. The solar fires in his heart were still burning. They couldn't look at him directly, but they bowed down before him as the king strode past their ranks toward him through the snow. He carried something very familiar in his hands, a thick black disc shimmering with silver light. Lucky stared at the king with the astrolabe in his hands, and a terrible thought began to form in the back of his mind. The astrolabe, his father's astrolabe. Was it Gala that had said, "He is waiting for you, he is expecting you even now, but are you absolutely certain that you wish to find him?" The king's eyes were shining as he looked at Lucky through the blizzard, as if Lucky were the most special person in the universe, as if he loved him. No, it couldn't be, and yet it would make sense of so much. "At last," said the king softly, as the snow swirled all around him. "What is mine has come back to me. I have waited so long, my son."
I was right. Oh yeah, I was right.
His
Didn't
words,
I say more? Didn't I say?
all right. His words made Lucky's heart shiver. "But my mother's human," he protested as he stared into those sunset red eyes. "I'm human." Yet even as he spoke, he remembered what Frolics and Bixer had said about their own parents. The genetic line always follows the mother's side. "Yes," said the king, "I loved a human woman once. When she realised that war was coming, she tried to protect you. She ran away with you. And though I searched and searched, she hid you too well for me to find. But I always prayed you would return one day, and the instant I saw my own astrolabe, I knew in my heart that day had come." So it was true. This was his father, not poor lost Major Dashwood, but Theobroma, the Axa King. The fire inside him went out. The great solar wind dropped down. Lucky took the power back into himself and felt again the exhaustion, the terrible pain that always came after these moments of incandescence. His hands, his head, his heart, every part of him hurt. He fell forward into his father's arms, naked and shivering in the snow. The king caught him. He covered Lucky with his own robes and lifted him from the ground. He carried him as if he was light as a feather. The snow swirled around them, but Lucky was not cold. Not in those arms. It was as if everything just melted away, as if no one else was there, just him and his father. And his father held him close, like he was a treasure. Bixer bristled beside them, needles flashing danger signals. "If you hurt my friend," she warned the king, though he towered over her, "I'll make you pay." The troopers touched their triggers at her words, but the king nodded respectfully at Bixer. "You are brave, warrior girl," he said, and a fearsome fighter. I have seen what you can do. Believe me, I will not hurt him, for I love him as much as you do. He turned to Lucky. You chose your friends well, my son. Bixer flushed. Bazooka spat sparks. Far above them all, Aquarius was screaming out supernova light, brighter and whiter and closer to death than ever. Lucky was almost unaware of all this, so powerful was his father's presence, but Bixer was not. We came to find you for a reason, King Theobroma, she said. We've got things to say to you, important things. Of course you do, said the king. Come with me. We have much to discuss and very little time. He took them to the grandest looking cabin on the edge of the encampment at the foot of the great ice mountain. He left his commanders outside with the instructions to bring food and drink and fresh clothing for Lucky. A warm fire flickered inside the cabin, bright enough to show old-fashioned wooden beams on the ceiling and bearskin rugs on the floor. There were no windows in here, just giant vid screens on the walls. The king sat Lucky down at a dark old table with many chairs around it, carved from the same wood. Lucky sat there, dazed, exhausted, and amazed. We did it, he was thinking. We found my father, and we found the king. Now he's going to stop the war and save the stars, and he's going to tell me why I've got this power. And Gala was wrong. I used it again, and I didn't die. I didn't burn my life away. I'm going to live. He basked in a warm glow as his father welcomed the others to the cabin. Captain Knox, he said, it has been too long. And can that be Mystica? He peered at the old lady as Frolics laid her down on the bearskin rugs. Mystica was weak, pale and clearly in pain, but she looked grand in spite of it all. Her golden eyes were clear and bright again, almost too bright, like pulses of supernova light. Yes, it's me, Theobroma, she said, warming her hands by the fire. I'm not at my beautiful best after a spell in your jail. But you can't get rid of me that easily. The king smiled at that. His face was full of compassion, his voice warm and sweet. I must apologise for the way you were treated, he said. Please understand, these are times of war. Many Axa have suffered and died because of the humans. My officers did not know who you were. They made a mistake. And all the other people in the caves, said Frolics, they all mistakes too. It's unfortunate if innocents have to suffer, said the king. It's not a perfect system. We know that. We do our best. Frolics didn't argue. He just hung back and watched the king silently with his starry blue eyes. The door opened. Lucky was brought new clothes and a pair of cloven hoof boots. Then trays of food were brought in, held aloft on silver platters. There were racks of meat and roasted birds, a huge dish of eyeballs and zocco for everyone.
I wish I could have eyeballs.
Me too. Eat, my friends, said the king, biting with relish into a leg of lamb. I have an appetite tonight. Let us celebrate. My son has come back to me. Lucky took some eyeballs, but he couldn't eat. His head was spinning with what had happened. Bixer didn't even bother with food. But if you know your son's an Astraeus, she said, and you know he's half human, then you must know the stars don't want this war. Why else would an Astraeus come down like that? He's proof that the stars want peace. Peace, said the king. Do you know what the humans are doing even as we speak? They are killing Aquarius. And the only way to save it, said Bixer, is to make peace. You have to do it, or it'll be the end of everything. Gala told us that, and so did Major Dashwood. Major Dashwood, scoffed the king. He was a shadow guard, one of them. He shook his head and sank his teeth into the lamb, ripping meat from the bone, stripping it bare. No, warrior girl, you are right. We must save the stars, but there are better ways of doing that, aren't there, Astraeus? He turned to Lucky, his eyes shining with passion and belief, but Lucky had questions for his father, questions he had crossed the whole galaxy to ask. If I'm really an Astraeus, he said, then why am I here? What am I meant to do with my power? The king held out his broad hands. Isn't it obvious? I knew war was coming, and I knew it would be long and hard and bitter. We needed something to tip the balance in our favour, a secret weapon. And you are that weapon." Lucky stared at his father. "A weapon?" he said numbly. "Is that what I am to you?" "You are my son, my only son, but yes, you are also the weapon that will win this war by destroying our enemies forever." Lucky shifted in his chair. Its back was very high. The oak felt hard and unyielding beneath him. Perhaps it was a chair fit for kings and princes, but it was beginning to make him uncomfortable. "But I'm not even a good fighter," he protested. "I'm clumsy and useless. If you need a fighter, Vix's the one you want." His father smiled. "I've seen your power, my son. It is greater than any fighter, greater than anything known to human or AXA warcraft." He threw the bare lamb bone down on his plate. "That is what I prayed for. That is why I found the lost legends, made the sacrifices, and performed the rituals to summon an Astraeus from the sky, and that is why the stars have sent you, to destroy the humans." Lucky shivered at his words. His father could be so warm and welcoming, yet so ruthless too. His gentle features hardened when he spoke of the humans. A different tone came into his voice, a tone you could not argue with. "Listen to yourself, Theobroma," said Mystica by the flickering fire. "Do you not remember? We are all connected. We are all one. From the stars we all come." "Spare me your sermon," said the king, his tone growing more bitter. "You star talkers always were so naive. The humans started this war, but now at last we have something that can finish it. Something greater than their science can conceive of." He turned to Lucky. "A star come down from the sky, and not just any star." "So, which Astraeus am I?" said Lucky, pulse beating in his ears. "You do not know? Your mother never said who you really were?" "She never told me any of this. All she ever tried to do was protect me. But now I'm here, I need to know the truth. So tell me, which of the 12 am I? Am I the Astraeus of war?" His father drew a deep breath. He looked very grave. Lucky's stomach was tied up in knots. He could hardly bear not knowing any longer. "Tell him, Theobroma," gasped Mystica, as the flickering flames burned low in the fireplace. "Even if it is as I fear, Lucky deserves to know the truth." "Lucky," said the king. He stood up to stoke the fire. "That is not your true name." "But that's what my mother called me." Theobroma's eyes flared. "Your mother," he muttered. He prodded the fire with a poker, building it back up, making the embers crackle with sparks. "How like her to wish that fate for you, and to deny the destiny you were born for." "Why?" said Lucky. "What is it? Who am I? What's my name?" The king closed his eyes, and then he spoke the words. "Your name is Lucifer, not Lucky.
Devil.
Lucifer."
I only know that off the telly. Lucifer means devil.
"No." Lucky recoiled from his father. "Don't pretend you never felt it," said the king. "You know what is in you and what you can do. You are Lucifer, the 13th Astraeus, the one we never speak of. There is one in every mythology, a devil, a destroyer of worlds, and that is what you are. You are the nightmare that has haunted humanity through its history, and now you will put an end to humanity, for you are the very devil himself, the Astraeus of destruction." Lucky felt dizzy, like his head was coming away from its shoulders, like the ground was falling away beneath his feet. But why? The king threw another log on the fire, and the flames rose up, spitting sparks that spiraled towards the ceiling. Space devils, he said. Space devils, he said. That's what they call us. So let them face the wrath of the real devil, not just people who happen to be different to them, but the ancient and terrible power that sends whole races to hell, the Alpha and the Omega, the end of all things. And now, finally, Frolic spoke up again. He'd been silent all this time, just watching the king. But now at last he spoke, his eyes glittering with cold blue flame. "You know what, Your Majesty," he drawled. "I don't think your story makes sense. No one can summon an Astraeus if a star comes down from the sky. Only the stars themselves can know why." "Oh, and who are you to make this claim?" asked the king with barely concealed disdain. "Oh, didn't I say?" replied Frolix. "I'm the new Star Talker of the past. I'm the one who knows everything that's gone before. I even know about that lost legend of yours." The king dropped the poker and stared at Frolix open-mouthed. "You may claim you summoned Lucky," Frolix said calmly, "but I'll tell you what really happened. The stars sent him. You recognised what power he had, and you wanted to use it for your own ends. You still do." The king hesitated a moment, then his eyes flared again. "Why else would the 13th Astraeus be here now at this time of destruction, if not to destroy?" Frolic sighed. "Professor Byzantine told me something about that on the Rainbow Temple wheel. He said some people think there's a 13th Astraeus, the Astraeus of destruction, but others think it's the Astraeus of creation." He shrugged his great shoulders. "Creation and destruction? The Prof thought they were two sides of the same Astraeus, the most powerful of them all, because the stars don't just destroy, they create too. They created everything." "But he is Lucifer," roared the king, striding to stand over Lucky. "And you know what that name means," said Frolic, standing up too. "It means bringer of light. That's all. Lucifer wasn't just the devil, he was also called the morning star, the brightest star. And in all the legends, one thing shines through. Lucifer was stubborn. He stood for free will and choice. So even if Lucky is Lucifer, I reckon he can do whatever he wants. With his power, he's the only one who can decide. You can't tell him what to do." "He is what he is," said the king. "He knows. He has felt it, I can tell." He crouched down before Lucky, his huge horns glittering in the firelight, and gazed deep into his eyes. "You must use your power, my son. You must destroy the humans." Lucky wanted to believe Frolix, but his father's words had gone deep inside him. He felt hot and cold all at once. He couldn't think straight. He couldn't stop the thoughts. Was I right after all? Am I evil? The devil? The 13th Astraeus? "I don't want to destroy the humans," he said at last. "I'm half human. They're part of me, like you are. And I'm not just a weapon, like a dark matter bomb. I was on Scorpio when the wheel was destroyed. I saw what it was like. Was it you who killed all those innocent people?" The king stood up. He walked over to the platters of food. He took a bird's wing, snapped it off in his hand. "The humans are not innocent," he said. "They use our stars to power their machines. They burn our suns to light their cities. And those who let them do this are not innocent either. The people of Scorpio had the choice to fight on the right side. They refused. They wanted to stay neutral. Now they know better. There is no neutrality. You are either with us or against us in war." "But Professor Byzantine was on that wheel. He died there," said Lucky. "Your dark matter bomb killed him and thousands who never did anything to you." "Bazooka!" cried the phoenix, her body glowing crimson in the firelight. Of course, we regret all loss of life, said the king, but that is the risk and the cost of war. I'll never understand why humans hate us, but so long as they fight us, we must fight them. So long as they see us as their enemy, we must be the worst enemy their nightmares can conjure. That is why I summoned you, of all the Astraeus, because that is what you are, Lucifer. Lucky flinched. Don't call me that, he said. Please, it's not my name. He coughed. Smoke was rising from the fire, thick smoke, heavy with pitch and tar. He felt he was choking on it, suffocating. He looked around for a window, a way out, but there was not a single window in the cabin. No view of the stars on the vid screens, only his father's red eyes burning into him. My son, said the king, you have more power than anyone in the galaxy. I gave you that power. Now use it for its proper purpose and put an end to this suffering. Lucky wanted to trust his father. He wanted desperately to believe that there might be a place for him here. But how could he? He watched the smoke rising, and all he could think of was the Rainbow Temple wheel. How is killing people going to make things better? He said. It'll just make humans hate you more. Bixer's right. You've got to make peace. It's the only way. No, said his father in a low voice. Now you have found me, we can stop them ever killing another star again. Just use your power. But I only just stopped it this time. If I use it again, I don't know where it'll all end. His father nodded. Destruction without end, he agreed. That's precisely what I prayed for. Mystica gasped. Her golden eyes were full of pain. But it would destroy him, she said. His body could not take it. He would die. We must be prepared to make sacrifices, said the king, if we are to win this war. Your own son, Captain Knox said. You have any idea what it means to lose a child? Are you really so full of hate that this war means more to you than he does? No one means more to me than my son. But yes, Captain, I would sacrifice everything for what I believe is right. I've sacrificed so much already for our cause. The king looked at Lucky, tentative, almost unsure of himself for a moment. Where is Diana, your mother? Why is she not here too? Lucky shook his head. The feelings burned inside him. There were tears like knives behind his eyes, but he dug his nails into his palms and he made himself say it out loud. The Shadow Guards, he said. They came for us. She saved me from them, but she... He looked down and said the words at last. She died. My mother's dead. The king closed his eyes. Then let us avenge her, he said very quietly. He opened his eyes again and they were burning, blazing red. All the gentleness and compassion was gone from his look, and that hard, bitter tone was all Lucky could hear in his voice now. Will you do it? Will you fulfill the destiny you were born for? Da, da, da.
I was going to do that. I don't know why it's the end of the chapter. He seems like a right heck of a dad.
Yeah.
Okay, go and destroy yourself so I can just kill a few humans. Yeah.
Bit of a common thing though.
What? Oh, like Darth Vader.
Yeah.
I am your father.
I was getting a little bit Galadriel, for those of you that have seen Lord of the Rings. I was getting a bit in there at one point. I had
Is it
to
Galadriel the elf?
bring it down. Queen of the Wood Elves, isn't she? I will become more beautiful and powerful
than you
can ever imagine. All will love me and despair. just in case you I'm usually better at that than that. But just in case you're ever watching Lord of the Rings, or Lord at Rings as they call it in parts of Lancashire, which I do love.
Why have you got Lord at Rings?
Lord at Rings. Lord at Rings. Like going to shop, go and get some pies in shop. Anyway, in parts of Lancashire they say Lord at Rings, and I really, really love that. But if you've watched the films, there's a bit in it where Kate Blanchett is Galadriel, and it's really good. I'll say no more because I'm probably boring you. But anyway, we will be back with more chapters soon. Hope you enjoyed them. Bye.